Now, when I first saw the headlines saying that 007 wouldn't be a misogynistic old dinosaur, almost immediately I could feel the saxophones blaring in the background. Because if you've been gaming for long enough, then you know exactly what that kind of wording actually signals. You hear phrases like modernized, updated for modern audiences, reimagined for the world we live in today. And almost immediately, without missing a beat, you can feel your gamer senses just tingling. And you know, judging by the way the internet reacted, you can tell that a lot of gamers actually felt this way. They had the exact same reaction. But then something weird happened. 007 First Light dropped, and instead of a disaster show, it was a cookout session. The game shipped 1.5 million copies in 24 hours. It's being praised and lauded as one of the greatest Bond games of our time. It's doing extremely well in reviews, and it doesn't seem to have butchered or neutered James Bond in any way that would be detrimental to what the character is or what he stands for. And now, seeing this, I'm over here wondering, were we too quick to judge this game? Because the actual answer is yes and no. You see, when the headline actually dropped, I, like most people, didn't really read it at all. I just read what it said and I was like, okay, that's what it actually is. But then I went back, searched for that article by PC Gamer, and actually read exactly what it said. And what I found will absolutely piss you off. When I saw the headline, I assumed that the actual developer from Interactive IO said that James Bond wouldn't be a misogynistic dinosaur. But when I read the actual article, it doesn't even say that. The phrase itself comes from 007's movie GoldenEye, whereby M says this word specifically to Bond.
You don't like me, Bond. You don't like my methods. You think I'm an accountant. A bean counter more interested in my numbers than your instincts.
The thought had occurred to me.
Good. Because I think you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur. A relic of the Cold War. Whose boyish charms, though wasted on me, obviously appeal to that young woman I sent out to evaluate you.
Point taken.
And what does PC Gamer do? They take that wording and apply it loosely to what the actual developer said. The actual devs basically said that 007 has been imagined through the different centuries that he finds himself in. And now they have a chance to tell the story of 007 in a way that makes sense for 2026. And they also added that they are looking forward to exploring this character. They said that Bond will have his usual quips, his charm, he'll have game. It'll be an awesome story for people to actually experience and enjoy. So what does PC Gamer do? The guy who wrote the article basically says, I'm taking this one line from this one movie, and since they also said, the devs, that it won't really be like, you know, Conroy's version back in GoldenEye, then that means that 007 First Light won't be a misogynistic dinosaur. Thank God. That's basically how this guy framed the entire thing. Absolutely lazy. And as you can imagine, gamers, we got pissed off. Rightfully so. Because not only do we actually have pretty good pattern recognition, we have seen this thing played out numerous times already. We've seen it in movies, we've seen it in games. Studios take characters, say that they're gonna update them or modernize them, and then suddenly the thing that we actually loved, cared about, we rocked with, starts feeling different, as if it's not the same thing anymore. It's weaker, it's flatter, it misses the point of the original. Almost as if it's weirdly embarrassed by the fantasy that made it cool in the first place. And I actually think that this is what gamers were actually afraid of here. It wasn't a don't change Bond kind of fear, but it was more of don't disrespect the fantasy. That was the actual fear. And there's an actual difference here, because take the character of Kratos. Kratos changed massively from how we knew him back in the God of War Greek saga, now as we know him in the Norse saga. He's completely different, and yet it still works. People still love him. We accepted God of War 2018 because Santa Monica respected the raw material that made Kratos who he is. Norse mythology or Norse saga wasn't a correction of what they had done in the past. It was a continuation and evolution. Kratos still feels masculine, powerful, deadly, dangerous. And Nassim Taleb is a book author. He has this term that he coined that he calls touristification. And what touristification basically is, it's when you over-optimize a product to become safer, more appealing, and easily consumable to the masses. Almost like a Disney ride. If you've ever gone on a Disney ride, then you've basically seen it all. It wouldn't be necessary for you to go on a Disney ride every single time you go to a Disney ride because you know exactly what you're going to get when you get there. There's nothing surprising, there's nothing out of the ordinary, it's safe and predictable. Now, gaming actually does the same thing all the time. We have yellow paint, objective markers, the game's way of basically grabbing you by the hand and telling you, no, not this way, little Johnny. And whilst I was thinking about this idea, of course, the idea of can that also be applied to game characters as well? Can game characters actually be touristified as well? Because when gamers actually saw those Bond headlines, I don't think they were thinking, oh, I guess Bond is changing. I think it was more of a Bond is actually getting corrected. Bond is getting safer, more committee approved. A Bond with the rough edges have been sanded off so that nobody gets uncomfortable. We don't want to offend modern sensibilities. And you know what the weird thing is? I actually think that somewhere along the way, modern creators started confusing depiction with endorsement. Like, if a flawed character actually exists, people assume that the story endorses the flaw. But as gamers, we are actually very good at being able to understand nuanced, morally messy characters. We are able to love characters like Joel from The Last of Us without basically endorsing and saying this is what a real man is supposed to do. We understand that this guy is an unlikable character, but we wouldn't hold Joel as a role model. The same way we don't hold Kratos as a role model, or Geralt, or Trevor, because we get it. We understand that the point isn't be this character, but it's experience this person. But then First Light finally comes out, and despite all the panic, we have people going, this actually feels like Bond. They did a really good job on this, which then forces me to ask, were we wrong? My personal opinion, maybe, but not necessarily for the reason you might think. Personally, I think gamers were not irrational to run with that headline. We have been burned way too many times at the stake. We've seen how these companies operate. We know their MO. So it wasn't really out of the question to see that headline and immediately judge the game before we even play it. That instinct alone is justified. That fear as well protects us. And sometimes we may judge the headline before we actually judge the game. Because despite the actual panic, IO Interactive actually seems to understand something that most studios seem to have forgotten. And that is simply respect the fantasy. Bond still feels competent, charming, dangerous, and freaking cool. So I think the lesson here isn't to never worry, but more of something along the lines of we need to learn when to panic and when to wait.